Hello and welcome to another episode of Learning to Live in the Present Moment. My name is Ted Robinson and I'm your host today. Today we're going to be talking about a very simple thing, but I find it has a lot of permeations in life. And that is that the ego goes with you all the way, right to the moment that you die. And there is no escaping the ego. There's only quelling it a bit, cultivating it a bit, harnessing it a bit, but it always will come up in the strangest of times, in the strangest of ways. It is always with you. The ego will never go away. And there is nothing to fear from the ego, and there's nothing to do with the ego. And we're not here to deny the ego or kill the ego or destroy the ego. The ego is a good thing. Now, let me explain what the ego is, because ultimately, if you don't even know what it is, it's hard to figure it out, and I have a specific definition that may be of help to you. It's that part of you that does all the thinking, or so it thinks. It's the part of you that is very me, my, mine, everything is about me. That's the ego. And it's focused primarily on the past and the future, not the present moment. I knew I'd get around to the present moment eventually, right? So it's not in the present moment at all. It's always in the past or future, and it's always about judgment. So do we really want to keep that ego around us all the time if it's always going to be in the past and future, never here, now, and it's always about judgment? Well, yes, we do. We want and we need the ego to be here with us. It travels with us right to the moment of death. Just that simple. We form it as young people. Now, it varies from person to person. It will depend upon when you, so to speak, lost your innocence. And I don't mean sexually, but the innocence of belief and that everything is as people say. After a while, when somebody promises you something repeatedly and it doesn't come true, the ego starts to arise and say, let's not believe that one. We know we can't believe this one. That's not true. Oh, that is true. And it starts to evaluate what's true and what's not true. It's not just innocent anymore. That's what I mean by it loses its innocence, as you lose your innocence. And you start to find out that not everything that glitters is gold, as they say. Not everything you're told is true. And what can you do about that except evaluate it and judge it? There's nothing wrong with any of this. The ego is not doing anything wrong. Let me get that abundantly clear. It is not doing anything wrong. In fact, it's doing a great service for you and I on a moment-by-moment, daily basis. Wow. But I thought the ego can't be present. It won't be in the present moment. That's absolutely true. It's not in the present moment. But it's a very great necessity if you want to live in this world efficiently and effectively. You need to figure out what's true, what's not true. You need to figure out what to wear in the morning, what not to wear, what combinations of things to wear. All is judgment. Do I open the door before going out, or do I slam my nose into it? Judgment. These are simple utilitarian things, but you need to know the distance between cars when you're backing up. Judgment. You need to think about your appointments that you need to make so you can make up the schedule for your day, so you make sure you're there at the time that you're scheduled to be there. That's thinking in the future. You need to think about the past so you can remember debts that are owed to you or debts that you owe to others. How would you know otherwise? You just forget it all. It wouldn't be around. You need to do all of these things because it's just part of living in life. Because generally, everybody is in judgment all the time, or most of the time, the vast majority of the time. And when we are not, we tend to sort of get lost after a while because we're sort of just hanging out here in presence. So underlying everything that I'm saying here is a very simple premise. You cannot be present all the time, regardless of what you might think, want, or say. Nobody is present 100% of the time. Nobody. Unless they're sitting in a corner and people bring them food and beverages, and help them go to the bathroom. You've got to have the ability to live in this world. And presence is pretty much not doing that in some ways, like past and future stuff, thinking stuff, planning stuff, judging things. All those things are a part of everyday life. So we definitely need the ego in our lives. However, the problems arise when the ego takes over a major proportion of our life, as has happened in most people's lives today. In other words, everything is about competition, keeping up with the Joneses, making sure that I accumulate as much as I can while I'm in this lifetime. Look at me, look at me, look at me. Those are all judgment things. And so the idea is to recognize the ego as it's doing whatever it does, being whoever it seems to be, and watching it. Now, I've spoken about this on the show before, but becoming the watcher is sort of having this part of you that's like the antennae in a bug, and it's always feeling everything out, watching everything. It's sort of like having a little extra set of eyes up here that watch what's going on in front where the ego is busily doing its thing. And being aware of the ego is the biggest antidote to being taken over by the ego. And that's what we really want to make sure we do. We don't want to be taken over by the ego, because it will do that. It tends to do that rather effectively. It tends to take us over. And that's not what we want in our lives. We want to be able to easily and gently go between the ego and presence, and making and bringing the whole thing to a predominance of the time in presence in your life. That's when you are a present person, so to speak. So it's a misunderstanding when people say, be present all the time, be here now all the time. It's just not possible in our lives the way they are right now. If you're living on an island, perhaps, if there's nothing you're required to do in your daily living, no problem. But as long as you have obligations, responsibilities, work schedules, social schedules, and all these other things, you need your ego to keep you in line and keep you scheduled and all the rest of these things. It's all a necessity of life. But the idea here is to become aware of the ego, even when it's busily judging others or even yourself. And even that has an element of ego judgment involved in it. How would you even know that you're judging yourself if you didn't evaluate it and say, oh, look at that, I just judged myself. Oh, what's that mean? Well, you've got to judge it a little bit. So there's always an element of the ego there. But the idea here of this show and of learning to live in the present moment in general is to start to recognize the ego, become mindful of the ego, see what it's up to, see what it's doing, see how it's insinuating itself into various situations in your life, and see how it tends to want to control your life. I'll be back in just a moment to explain more. Don't go away. Welcome back. So what I want to tell you is that even awakened masters, enlightened beings as they're called, still have ego. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, one of the myths that I've embraced through most of my quest has been that once somebody is enlightened, once somebody is awakened, they'll never have another ego bout, so to speak. Nothing will impact them ego-wise. It's just not true. But when they're teaching, when they're in the midst of being present, they're wonderful. But their egos will come back in just like yours. The difference is they become more aware of it. I'm telling you, in my own experience, I've seen wild things happen with ego, with awakened beings. And again, while it can throw you initially, you just come back to saying, well, they're here on earth. They're here in this density we call human form, and that's what we're here for. Each opportunity, each time something like that happens, we have an opportunity to learn from it. So they're always learning too. We come here to earth to learn from our experiences. Because we start to awaken to the present moment and be in the present moment as much as we can, doesn't mean that we're not going to still have experiences from which we can continue to learn. If we didn't continue learning, there'd be no point in remaining here on earth other than to help others. So everybody is going to have these experiences. But the big thing to remember is not to judge them. Even if you're the awakened master, you're not here to judge yourself. That's when the watcher comes in again, to watch and make sure that you're just learning from each new experience, even if it's an experience of ego, getting out of control, doing its thing, whatever it might be, and still watching it. That's when you know that you've become the master, because you see the ego for all it is, and you don't even judge it then. And here's what I really want to share with you. I was watching Wayne Dyer last night, and he said something that really resonated with me and that I know of as well. And that is that God never judges you. God never judges you. The ego judges you. You'll judge yourself more than anybody else sometimes. Oh, if they knew what I know, they'd never be my friend. If they knew what I know about me, I couldn't face them. We all carry secrets around. So the idea here is that you might judge yourself more harshly than your friends might, or your enemies might. Your enemies will judge you. But the one being, the one universal consciousness of God, of the divine, whatever you wish to call that being, that's the motivating, energizing factor in all of life, will never judge you. In fact, that motivating, energizing life energy is love. And love is simple acceptance. Unconditional acceptance. Love. And here's the other part of it that's so valuable. You are comprised of that energy. You are love. You are part of God. You are an infinitesimally small part of God. And yet all of you is comprised of God. Does that make you God? I leave that up to you to decide. I can tell you that the ego would say, yeah, absolutely, I'm God, I'm God. That's what all the big conquerors have said. I'm the God. All the kings said, I am God, or I'm direct descendant of God. That's not what I'm saying here. What I am saying is that you are made up of nothing but God. It's only the ego that gets in the way of you expressing and being the love that you are. And the ego does a fine job of that, boy, I'll tell you. The ego just loves to get in the way. It thinks it's protecting you. But while it can be your protector in certain situations, if you get too invested in the ego, too believing in the ego, then it winds up altering your life and standing in the way of the small voice of God within. So ultimately, while the ego goes with you right to the moment of death, and perhaps beyond, that is not the part to pay attention to. That's not the part of your mind to pay attention to. The part of your mind that you really want to pay attention to is when you quiet the ego. I wouldn't say stifle it, but quiet it. Allow it to just become quiet. And when the ego is quiet and not chattering away in both ears inside, when you quiet the ego, something else arises within you, something quite remarkable and profound. It is the voice of God, the voice of love, the voice of the divine, whatever name you wish to give it. You can call it intuition if you wish, because intuition is one of the ways in which God communicates with you directly. But the idea here that I'm trying to get across as best I can is you cannot hear those voices of intuition, of knowing, of feeling, while the ego voice is chattering away in your ear like this, or both ears like this, or it's right in the forefront of your mind, talking to you, thinking all the time, working everything out. I've got to figure this all out. When you're trying to figure things out, it just doesn't work. When you suddenly go quiet, immediately the answer comes. That's the voice of God coming to you. Now, you don't have to call it that. That's just my name for it. It might be that's your intuition. That's your thought without the thinker coming forth from your subconscious mind. You can call it anything you want. But you've had those moments of inspiration. And if you take the word inspiration apart, you'll see it says in spirit. Inspiration. In spirit. It's spirit that's within, that is in direct connection with God. But you have to quiet the conscious mind, the ego mind, enough to hear those inspirational thoughts. But when you do, my goodness, they do come through. And that's when things really start to happen. Don't go away, I'll be right back. Welcome back. So when you get those inspirational thoughts, life gets very good. You become inspired and things start to really happen in your life. However, again, don't forget, the ego comes with you to the moment of death. It will travel right along with you. And in those moments of old habits, of old fears and worries and anxiety and stress, the ego will come right back up. We have to do this, we have to do this. And suddenly you're back in ego again. There are two great antidotes. One is just simple mindfulness. The watcher comes out and watches the whole thing, and all of a sudden, I can take a deep breath again. All right, I remember to take a breath. Okay, good. Or I can be present. And just, if you need to, you put your hands up and bring them out, keeping your eyes still and unfluttered, unblinking. And then suddenly you're present. Ego's quiet, instantly quiet in presence. That's why presence is so valuable to learn. Because as soon as you are present, truly present, the ego goes quiet. It has no choice. You can't do two things at once with your mind. So if you're thinking and chattering away inside, you cannot be present. That's why I teach this little simple thing. Bring your hands out, focus your eyes on one thing, and don't blink. And you're present. The ego's quiet. Now the ego will come back. It's up to you at that point to say, not now, ego, not now. I'm just being here now. You can say, I'm just meditating, and close your eyes and meditate. You can look, and open-eyed meditation works. But the whole idea of this is to recognize when that ego mind is going to jump you again and pop up. Now, I've said before, the ego goes with you right to the moment of death. And here's an important thing to remember, because I've been there. I've actually thought I was dying. And I thought, wow, look at me, I'm ready to die. I haven't said it. I can die anytime. I'm at peace now. I'm in presence. And the moment that I thought I was actually dying, couldn't breathe or whatever it was, suddenly I panicked. Oh, I waited too long. I have to call. And suddenly I realized It's my ego. And I can't do a thing about it right now. I'm in a full-blown panic. I tapped myself. I did EFT and came through it. But the ego's right there. And the reason for that is because the ego knows it cannot go with you after the body and mind die. You, on the other hand, are a spirit. You are immortal. You are a soul inhabiting this body. You do not die. The true you that is you never, ever dies. Ego, on the other hand, is something that your mind has made up to protect you. And so it dies with the mind. Now, it doesn't mean you won't get a new ego when you reincarnate again, if you should choose to. But the point is that the ego will panic because it's afraid of death. Because it knows if the body dies, the mind dies, and the ego dies. It's aware of that. It will do everything in its power to stop you from dying. And that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with it. This is what I'm trying to say to you. There's nothing wrong with the ego. None of it's bad. None of it's wrong. But it's all the ego. The whole image of what your life is about is all about the ego, its belief systems. So the truth of life is just here now. And this is the only place it can be, in the present moment. This is it. This is all of it, right here and now. And when you're present, everything is here with you. And you are aware of it. You're mindful of it. You're conscious of it. You're aware of it. When you're in your ego, you put your blinders on, you get your focus on one particular thing, and if it doesn't happen, you're upset. If it's not going to happen, it hasn't happened yet, you're nervous and sweating. That's not the present moment. You see the difference? And the idea here is no matter who you are, no matter what you've accomplished in terms of mindfulness or presence, there will always be times in your life when the ego arises. And that's okay too. And that's the message I want to get across to you today. It's all okay. Because ultimately we're here to learn from these experiences in life. And ultimately, we never go away. We are a part of God. And that can never be destroyed. That's the only truth there is. We are love. I am love and you are love. Completely. The only thing that stands in the way is that ego. So become aware of it. Watch it. Even when you've awakened, watch it, because it'll still arise. And when it does, say, hey, I see you now. Thanks, it was great to see you again. And now I'm present. And that's my message for today. I hope this has been helpful to you. And I hope to see you next time, same place, as we learn to live in the present moment together. Have a wonderful day.